This is not me telling you what to do. This is not me telling you how to practice or, selling you on a religion. I really created a meta-myth structure so you can have a system for looking at yourself and saying, is this who I really want to be?
Yeah.
And being with a bunch of people that are open-minded and sharing their own process and supporting you in yours. It's really a system of how do you create real freedom for yourself and learn how to love yourself and love others in ways that are nourishing to you and more fulfilling to you. And when we learn to do that, we always create more wholeness in ourselves because love inherently wants to become what it really is.
In today's busy world, how can we find the inspiration, knowledge, and energy to live a healthy and empowered life? If we balance and harmonize our mind, exercise our body, live according to the laws of nature, and connect to spirit, can we find a way to heal, become our authentic self, and live our purpose with love? I am your hostess, Amy Fournier, and welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite. Hey everybody, I want to be part of the solution, don't you? Well, it starts with you and your choices and what you put on your skin, what you put in your body, what you put in your mind. Did you know that I have an e-store and a lot of my favorite products that I use every single day that have changed my life for the better are in there? You'll find things such as frequency harmonizing music, beautiful organic skincare products, supplements, healthy snacks, photon red light therapy, biogeometry products and jewelry, and even my favorite cacao with dark chocolate, yummy goodness and health. You can find all of these products and more on my website, amyfournier.com. Just go to the tab e-store there, go to the recommended products and scroll down and have fun shopping. Use my coupon codes, save some money, and let me know what you think. Welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. This show is about helping you to be healthy and fit in mind, body, and spirit, as well as harmonize your masculine and feminine energy, tap into your intuition, your true source of power, and awaken your authentic self. Today, as usual, I have a very special guest for you, but this is extra, extra special because this is a huge announcement that's about like 4 years in the making, if not a lifetime in the making. My good friend is back on the show, Mr. Paul Chek, because he has finally released basically his magnum opus, his life's work, his 40-year career and counting of holistic health. He is the grandfather of the whole holistic health movement with nutrition and functional exercise, incorporating Chinese medicine and all the different systems, and really helping regular people as well as elite athletes, superstars, celebrities, all that from every walk of life get results, get healthier, get fit, and get real. Paul is truly amazing, and honestly, he doesn't really need an introduction, right? Several years ago, I ended up hiring Paul, even though he was my good friend, as my personal mentor and coach because he worked me through basically a midlife crisis where I was doing well on the outside, but not doing that great on the inside. Long story short, but look, if you want to hear that whole story and, geez, just hear more about Paul Chek, definitely check out Awakening Aphrodite episodes 100 and 200 because Paul was my guest for both of those very important, century marking episodes, right? Episode 100 and 200. And we get into the whole backstory, particularly in episode 100. So this is a really important third appearance for Paul because, like I said, his magnum opus, his life's work, which he has called Spirit Gym. Isn't that like the most perfect title? I'm so fortunate to have been partnering with Paul at the beginning of this program and the creation of the idea and supporting him and going out there and making this actually materialize. It's been such an amazing journey to really even just witness his creative process while juggling the rest of his extremely stressful and demanding life with all the responsibilities that he has. So even that alone and just walking shoulder to shoulder with him as he created this amazing contribution to society, Spirit Gym, and learning from how we managed it all, right? Everyone's so busy and crazy. And how do we prioritize things? How do we minimize distractions? How do we focus on things that really get us traction and contribute in service to the world with significance? Well, Paul's the master of all that. And I can't wait for him to share with you his baby, Spirit Gym. Today, we talk about why he created it and how we need to examine our beliefs about God and some really deep, deep subject matters that if you get triggered easily, you might not be interested in this. But if you're open-minded and, maybe just want to have some new ideas to consider why you think, how you think, and if it's truly what you believe in your heart, I think you're going to love this episode. He talks about the relationship between love and the mind, and the evolution of the consciousness, understanding God, understanding myths. We get into the Big Bang Theory. What, in fact, is spirit anyway? We get into unconditional love, how to be a more effective thinker, and we get into reflection, the beautiful archetype of the moon, which is very near and dear to my heart because we get into that a lot in my forthcoming online course, Goddess Rising. A big part of that curriculum, we get into the moon cycles and the influence of the feminine moon energy on particularly women, if not all people, but definitely women. And lastly, we can't have a conversation with Paul without talking about the pain teacher, the famous pain teacher, and the connection between what lesson the pain teacher is giving us and what our soul is trying to tell us. Why the pain teacher is there. We all got one. And how we can listen to that teacher so we're not in pain anymore. It sound good to you? Sounds good to me. So let's get to this amazing, informative, beautiful conversation with Paul. I hope you consider looking into Spirit Gym, joining this beautiful community of people. It's an online course. It'll blow your mind. Per usual Paul Chek delivery, there is nothing like it. I'm involved in Spirit Gym. You'll see me there, and I hope you consider looking into it. We get into that information at the end of the show, and of course, that's in the show notes if you want to check it out. So before we do, I just want to share with you one thing that I added to my e-store, my newest favorite product that I think every human being needs, unfortunately. It's called Masterpiece. It is the best, simplest detoxification little tincture you're going to find. We need it. Chemtrails in the air. They're spraying aluminum on us from above. We got all the toxins in the food and water supply. If you've gotten any shots or been around people that have gotten shots, you've got graphene oxide and all these other nanoparticles you got to get out of your body. Our body needs help, and I found Masterpiece. I'm so grateful for finding it. All you do is take a few drops on an empty stomach. I do it twice a day. I even give it to my dogs. And it is the master binder. Plus it has marine plasma. It's got the nanoparticles, so it gets into the cell. It basically works. I can't even believe it. I love this stuff. So I've got it on my website. Oh, and I've got the creator of it coming on Awakening Aphrodite, of course, to explain to all of us the science and effectiveness of this amazing, amazing supplement. So you might want to check that out on my e-store. And of course, there's a coupon there for you to save a little bit of money. All right, now let's get to this wonderful conversation with my dear soul brother, Paul Chek. And we're back, everybody. Paul, Mr. Paul Chek, welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite.
My pleasure. Great to be here. Always great to visit.
Third time's a charm, and boy, did we save the third one for the most special one of all. Spirit Gym is alive and kicking. It is now open to the world, so welcome to Spirit Gym, everybody.
Yay!
Yahoo! Okay, Paul, now that your baby came through the birth canal, it's out in the world, it's breathing, what do you think? How are you feeling about the whole thing?
I started writing and researching for Spirit Gym 10 years ago, but I really started writing the book series, which is the basis of the web-based membership training program 4.5 years ago. So it's been a big process. It's by far the biggest project I've ever done in my whole life, for sure. And it is really my magnum opus. It integrates all aspects of my Chek Institute offerings, with all the other things that I've done in my private workshops and the web-based workshops, it's really a synthesis of everything that I've learned in my entire life that I think is most important for everybody to understand and practice now more than ever, due to the obvious situation that the world is in, that humanity's in, that nature's in. It's, as I've said and you've said, it's all hands on deck at this point, because we can't deny what's so blatantly obvious. But one of the main drives behind the creation of Spirit Gym was the fact that top-down approaches have not worked ever. We've seen many civilizations come and go. The Romans are a great example of a civilization that became big and powerful, but then lost its way and crumbled into the history books. And we're repeating all the same mistakes that we've made over and over again. And the point being is that humanity has a tendency to wait for somebody else to come fix its problems, their problems, personal problems, whether it be running off to doctors or experts of one type or another, or expecting some three-letter agency to fix it, or some president or government or prime minister. And so realizing that not only was not going to happen because it's just not profitable, and these people are always chasing money more than anything else, and power, that it is really time for a grassroots movement for us to take responsibility for our commitment and our contribution to the whole, and to understand what it is that we each can do and need to do, so that we can be the change that the world needs, and know that when we've changed ourselves for the better and we're living our dreams and coming into a more holistic, responsible relationship with all aspects of life, that we are emulating that for everybody, that our choices and our expenditures, our use of money, are being channeled into sustainable practices and into ways of communicating, sharing, relating, and living that start bringing us back into harmony with each other and with nature. And so I put the whole program together to educate people on each of the key aspects of human life, and how we interface with nature, from the physical, the biological, to the mental, emotional, to the spiritual dimensions. And because it's a holistic program, it shows you how every single one of these aspects of life, or aspects of our life, has an influence on all the other aspects of ourself. The problem with scientific materialism and left brain rationality is it isolates things, and it keeps isolating more and more until it loses connection to everything. And so we've got a long history of being educated through the education system to see parts but not see wholes. And so you can become, somebody who's got very, very high levels of knowledge and skill at a specific trade or craft or science, but still not know how to eat, or how to take care of yourself, or understand what spirit is, and what spirituality is, and how that differs from religion, and what are the challenges of belief systems, etc. So Spirit Gym's really designed to give people the education and the tools they need to understand life holistically, because if you don't understand life holistically, you can never address it holistically.
It starts at such a foundational level. You really go under the layers before you get to the stuff that's on the surface, unlike other programs. You start with just that basic concept, like you've mentioned many times in your many decades of experience working with thousands of people, that go right back to our idea of the self, the soul, our relationship with the divine, like what the divine is, what the divine expects of us are the beliefs that we're not even conscious that we have, that dictate our thoughts, that dictate our actions, that dictate our outcomes, you know. So you just peel it way back to where you start in Spirit Gym to address that. Like you go right after it to know that, you know, the rest of it's all just window dressing until you really address that stuff.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the most challenging realities for people to face, because almost everybody, 85% of the world population claims religious affiliation, which means, you know, most people were raised in families practicing some form of religion. And so by the time they're, you know, a teenager and or on their own, their whole unconscious programming, which is unconscious because it was programmed into them before the ego forms and before the memory function really starts to kick in. You know, research in psychology shows that it's fairly normal for people not to have clear memories prior to, you know, earlier than the age of 6. Occasionally, someone can remember something from when they were 5, 4, 3, but they don't have the kind of memory that a child, that a child does. You know, you can ask somebody what was it like to be in the first grade, and a lot of people have very distinct memories. But if you ask them for, you know, what did you do on your 4th birthday, very few people can answer a question like that. But the key point being is that when we're in that first 7 to 12 years of our life, we're on automatic complete download. And psychologists and hypnotherapists have shown, beyond a shadow of a doubt, you can even under hypnosis get people to tell you details of being in utero that are very, very accurate and can be verified by questioning the mother about such experiences that the conscious person doesn't have any awareness of. So when you realize that we're in this very powerful download experience, then all the things that we can look at once our ego is formed from a rational perspective, like religious ideas, those things are inherently in our operating systems and operating behind the conscious mind. So, point being, most people's beliefs about God are all programmed ideas that were passed into them by other people, but they have never really been able to have an open minded approach with rational discernment, nor with enough education and depth of world religion to really look at the concept of religion holistically. But what I, as you know, because I point this out to all my students, but what I point out is that when you look at the nature of God, either from a scientific perspective, such as quantum physics, or you look at it from a philosophical perspective, or you look at God from a spiritual perspective, or you look at God from just the perspective of love. For example, I've never met a single religious person that when I ask them, if God is love, would God be sex and violence love? Would God be conditional love? Would God be empathetic and compassionate love? Or would God be the highest form of love, unconditional love? Every single person in my entire career that believes in God has all agreed, without even having to think about it, that God is unconditional love. So what I show in Spirit Gym is that for God to be God, God would have to be unconditional love, because to be anything else would require another God. Something has to be a priori to conditions, right? Mm-hmm. So when you look at the nature of that, it means by definition that there is no condition in God, that there is no requirement, that there is no rules, there is no regulations, there is no commandments, there is no thou shalt, because there is nothing here but God. And by definition, God is the only being that can create and sustain itself. And that's one of the key definitions of God. You know, no star creates itself. No planet creates itself. No living being creates itself. Anything that's a living being in nature has to come by way of a mother and a father, which had to come by way of a mother and a father. And that's an infinite regress, because those are requirements for life. But God can create itself and sustain itself. And God, by definition, is that for which there is no other. When you're talking about God, you're talking about something that is so total and so complete and so absolute that there cannot be any means by which there can be another God, or you again have an infinite regress. Now, why that's important and why I'm bringing it up is because if God is that for which there is no other, and the only being that can create and sustain itself, it functionally means that there's nothing here but God, and that everything we see, whether we like it or not, is all an expression of the divine. And since the divine has no other to be in relationship with, it cannot come to know itself by any way other than creating relationships within itself. And that is the inherent nature of love. It is an actual fact that God has to dream conditions into existence so that it can love itself unconditionally. Because by definition of God being that for which there is no other, there can't be anything else but God. So that's kind of one of the paradoxes of God is you have all these people all over the world looking desperately for God, whether it be through religion, philosophy, science, etc., the God molecule, the God
The God
particle,
gene.
the God
God
gene.
gene. Yeah.
Everybody's looking for God by doing, reductionist science or reductionist this or that. But the reality is there is nothing here but God. And so God creates conditions, the conditions being the dream of itself, so that there can be a relationship. And because God is a priori to mind is a duality. When God dreams itself into existence, which is an infinite and perpetual process, it looks into itself, dreams characters up, and pours its love into them, which is no different than us dreaming. When we're dreaming, we're unconscious, but we can dream up all sorts of characters, from people to dragons to strange and mysterious things. And we immediately are in relationship to those characters. And as you know, dream experiences can be more vivid than waking life experiences.
Yeah.
And we know how powerful dreams are because people have orgasms in dreams, and there's nobody there. So you have to say, wait a minute, if I'm unconscious and I'm having a dream, maybe I'm making love to somebody in a dream, and it's so real that my body orgasms. Well, what that's showing you is that the dream is emerging from this mysterious place of the unconscious, and it has so much purchase power and so much authenticity that our entire physiology believes it. So the paradox of all this is God is dreaming all these characters into relationship. It pours itself into each character as the subject or their perceptual faculty. For example, if you do active imagination and you're working with an archetype, it'll start talking to you. But your ability to perceive that archetype or that archetypal being is God's capacity for perception within you, which is called the subject. And the subject is dreaming the object into existence. So, in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that the part that people don't like is coming face to face with the fact that whatever is good or evil is the manifestation of God. But because God cannot be conscious of itself without these dualities, then paradoxically, a lot of the things that we don't like about ourselves, we don't like about each other, we don't like about the world, we don't like about life, turn out to be absolutely inherent to and necessary for the growth of consciousness, without which we cannot make any sense of meaning out of anything. So, kind of one of the key principles of Spirit Gym is the reminder that we are all Ram Das, which in Hindu Ram means God and Das means worker. So we are all God manifesting itself in and as individuals who engage in relationships of love. And out of the relationship of love comes the sharing of energy and information, which is the basis of mind. So the paradox of all this is that God has to create the illusion of other in order to experience love. And because you can't have a mind without two sentient points to share information, which is a relationship, love turns out to be the basis of mind, which is the process by which we share energy and information in order to make meaning out of it all. So what you see right there is step one in Spirit Gem is you need to understand the true nature of God so you don't fill yourself with stories that don't empower you. Two, you have to understand love is the basis of all creation and all relationships, without which we could not have mind. Therefore, the way you love turns out to have a big influence on the way you mind or remind yourself of the truth of yourself. And so when you become conscious of what God is, and conscious of what love is, and conscious of what mind is, you realize that you actually have co-creative agency in this process called life, in what I call Spirit Gem, which is where we learn to work with the resistance necessary for conscious growth, development, and evolution. And the deeper reality is our evolution, personally and collectively, is God's evolution. And this is what God is doing at every level, in every dimension. And whether you want to go with a universe model or a multiverse model or an omniverse model or a multidimensional model such as string theory, because God is that for which there is no other, there is nothing here but God, no matter how you slice that pie. And when you realize that, if you really want to be a spiritual person or even a religious person, then it really means we have to step up our game. And it's, and this is why Jesus said these strange things like, love thy enemy as thyself. If someone hits you, turn the other cheek. The kingdom of heaven is before you, but men do not see it. I and my Father are one. And the sad part of it is that most people don't have enough spiritual depth to read the statements of a Buddha, a Jesus, a Lao Tzu, a Krishna, etc., and really understand what they mean, because they're already so programmed with duality that they cannot see the unity being expressed in the words of truly enlightened people. And so the goal of Spirit Gym is to help educate people so that they can understand that the greatest trick of God is that it's everywhere and everything, and that the greatest possible opportunity for evolution in Spirit Gym as an individual and collectively is to understand the principles by which spirit unfolds itself in manifestation, so that we can all work together with a conscious understanding of what it is that we're actually doing and why we're doing it, for God, with God, and as God, and why we're doing it for ourselves, why we're doing it for our friends, our family, and for each other on a global scale, which has to include nature, because without nature, we can't exist. So, that's just sort of a summary of that first principle of why it's so important to understand God. And even if you don't believe in God, because Spirit Gym's a meta myth theory, I designed it so that you can plug your own story in. And because it's based on principles, for example, the principle of the mind, it doesn't tell you what to think. It just says, this is how thinking works. This is what thought is. And it shows you what a myth is. And it says, Spirit Gym simply saying, plug yourself in here, but I'll show you how to analyze your own story so you can ask yourself, is it producing what I really want in my life? And know that you now will be taught the tools to alter your story or recreate your story so that you can live more life affirmatively and create what you want, and know that you have that ability in you, because we all do.
So, one of the things that a lot of people in the world are currently struggling with the state of society, and when we're recording this, it's a week or two after the assassination attempt of presidential candidate Donald Trump. We had the cyber crisis with the security of the airports, everything going down, the withdrawal of Biden from the presidential race. There's, I just heard today in the news that they've slaughtered millions more poultry and chickens claiming bird flu. There's just all this strife going on. You and I were chatting offline about trying to get parts and things for our homes to replace certain equipments, and the supply chain not being available, and that which is available is just such low quality and a bunch of junk. So everybody knows that we are obviously in this huge awakening state of transition, which is a beautiful time because we can really embrace that we're here now, and we can dream the new existence into being, into manifestation. And Spirit Gym is the perfect tool to help us actually do that. But Paul, to your point that all there is God, there is none other. And you even quote a couple of the passages that are common in the Bible, something to the reference,
Isaiah 45:7.
Thank you. Yeah, please. Could you recite that?
Yeah, Isaiah 45:7 in the King James Version,
Yep.
which is probably one of the most commonly read,
Yep.
says, I create the light and dark, good and evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. And that passage is so profoundly true, but so irritating to Christians because they desperately want this second God called the devil to be a scapegoat for all their own, shall we say, misgivings, that they actually started rewriting that passage 25 or 30 years ago. You can look at many of the new Bibles, and that passage has been changed so that it does not state that. It states something else. And that lends itself to another problem, because most fundamentalists will tell you that the Bible is the inspired word of God and it's never been changed. But the Bible's been changed over and over and over and over again. And
it's missing books. I mean, the books of Mary Magdalene isn't even in there.
Right. I mean, the whole thing is just a construct of really a collection of myths that have been manipulated by high-ranking officials for, specifically for mind control. And, we have other problems with religion as well. And I like to quote Shankara, who wrote the book, The Crest Jewel of Discrimination, and was a Hindu philosopher sage and a very unique human being. Shankara began walking the country of India on foot at age 8, challenging every spiritual guru he could find. And the more famous, the more he was interested in them, to a debate. And he never lost a single debate in his life. And he was a very enlightened soul right from early childhood. And Shankara said, no man can understand scripture until he is enlightened. And when he is enlightened, he does not need scripture. And so the reason that's such a key fundamental point and such a true statement, regardless who said it, is I ask people, what percentage of the people teaching Sunday schools, pastors, preachers, bishops, clergy are actually enlightened? And well, most would agree that's probably less than 1%, if that. So that means 99% of us, and this is loose math because it's probably far less than 1%, we can say 99% of us were taught what God wants, what God expects, what God is, by people that really were very, very undereducated, who often, for the most part, had no what Ken Wilber would call wake-up experiences of their own, no true, legitimate mystical experiences, no samadhis, no union experiences, no authentic religious experiences of their own. So really what you get is like going to law school and memorizing laws and rules and codes and various types of legalese. And so that really, what we call religion, turns out to be the memorization of somebody else's ideas written on paper and then claimed to be the word of God. And part of growing up in Spirit Gym is looking at these kinds of challenging issues and asking this fundamental question: is it really true? Is it really true that God will burn you in hell? And doing the work to honestly and openly investigate that, not only on the inside of yourself, but looking into the writings of the most enlightened people. One of the things that I have a habit of doing, because so many of the people that come to me with health problems, I track right back to religious ideology, creating huge stresses inside of them and stopping them from living true to themselves, is I take them into my library. And so whatever their religion is, be it Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, and I pull out books written by the mystics of that religion. And so I say, well, here, let's look at what Meister Eckhart has to say about this particular Bible passage, or what Rudolf Steiner has to say, or what St. Hildegard of Bingen. So why I do that is because if I try to do that with writings from philosophy or outside of their own religion, they're going to reject it because that level of consciousness is part of a belief system which has an immune system that attacks any other ideology. But when you read it from their own religion, from the very people that came from the same upbringing, but then did have true union experiences with God, that did transcend literal interpretations and ethnocentric interpretations and allegorical interpretations, to be able to produce truly inspirational interpretations that the rest of us could look at these passages and see much deeper into them than we had eyes to see. It opens people up, and they realize, oh my God, there is another way to understand this that nobody ever taught me. And it becomes very, very liberating for them. And so I think it's important to know that within each of the world's major religions, there are enlightened people, but oftentimes they're crucified what's it called when I forgot, I'm brain farting on, when you kick somebody out, you
Extricate?
extricate them, or
Or
like a good example is Baruch Spinoza. He was Jewish, and he had a very, very enlightened view of God, and he wrote about it, and he was Einstein's favorite, shall we say, philosopher teacher, but he got excommunicated. He
oh,
got
excuse
excommunicated.
me,
So here you have an enlightened soul who offers the whole Jewish population a completely more wholesome view of God, and they excommunicate him, right? So it's just sort of sad, but you can see that
Well, that's happening now.
it is happening now. And just
Yes.
kind of
Like
like
you
just
said, it's repeating. Like in the beginning, you were mentioning things are repeating like again.
yeah, and just like,
Mhm.
when you're a kid, you really want to believe in Santa Claus because Santa Claus is a safe, loving source of abundance and nurture. And there's a time in a child's life where it realizes that mommy and daddy are Santa Claus. And so some children don't really want to let go of the idea that the tooth fairy brings them money and that Santa Claus brings them presents, because no one ever says Santa Claus will burn you in hell, and the tooth fairy doesn't take teeth out of your mouth that aren't under your pillow. But God will do all these terrible things. So we have this situation where um, we're at a point now where we can really say, are we ready to become adults and realize that just as we had to outgrow Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy, it's time for us to outgrow reading books and memorizing them and become adult enough and brave enough to seek our own relationship with God and nature and life and each other, and know that if God is love, then the best guide we have, the best inner compass we have, is just asking ourselves, what would love do now? Would love destroy nature? No, it wouldn't. Would love destroy people that have different belief systems? No, they would try to find commonalities and ways to get along and value and appreciate each other. I mean, most people have no problem listening to music made by other people of other colors, of other races and other belief systems. I mean, whoever says, well, I'm not going to listen to that music because the guy that made it is a Muslim? We don't even know these things. We just love the music. We go to Chinese restaurants, Jamaican restaurants, Japanese restaurants, Spanish restaurants, and I've never seen anybody walk in and before they order say, well, what religion is the chef? Because if they're not the same religion as me, I'm not going to eat the food. Well, we go to enjoy the beauty that each of us brings to the table. We love each other's art. We love each other's music. We love each other's dancing styles. We love each other's food. Well, why not just love each other and grow up together and realize that we all need each other and we all need the planet to be healthy and our children need us and the planet healthy. And I think that will be the beginning of the end of the era of perpetual childhood, which has been programmed into our education and programmed into our religion to keep us controllable, profitable, and under the iron fist of somebody else's ideology.
That's such an interesting point, because what came to mind for me was, we know what we like. The body knows what it likes. And it's like the thinking mind, the ego mind, the preconditioned program beliefs is what gets in the way and mucks it up. And one of the things I love about all your work, Paul, ever since I've known you, every program, every book, everything you've done in your career, is you always say you don't teach people what to think, but more you're trying to teach people how to think. And this is very common in culture right now. We're hearing other experts in other industries with everything going on talk about a lot of the problems we're seeing in society are because people just lack the critical thinking skills. And there's a whole theory of what's going on in the school system that's purposeful or not. Everyone has an opinion, but people don't know how to think critically anymore for themselves, and
Well,
looking outside for the answers. So do you want to talk about the way Spirit Gym helps cultivate our ability to think critically, therefore from ourselves, and get more accurate, holistic answers?
Well, I think it's important. And one of the first things that you do when you go through Spirit Gym training, I have the first set of lessons called the Master Key Lessons, which are based on the 10 principles, which at some point we can review. But the first thing that we do once we cover some of the very essential principles is we get into myth. And myth is the container for all stories. The word myth really means story at its core level. And just to show you how far we've gotten from the truth, today most people use the word myth to imply a lie.
Lie, yep.
And that's what happens. And the reason that happened, by the way, is because so many people of this scientific, materialist, rational, logical, left brain orientation looked at the myths and things like the myths of the Bible. The earth was, God created the earth in 7 days, or Moses parted the Red Sea and things like that.
And the flood and the ark.
All of these things, Jesus walking on water. So they looked at them and analyzed them scientifically and deemed that none of them were true, which is completely to overlook a myth. One of the fundamentals of myth is a myth is something that is never true, but always will be. Okay, so there you go. A myth is a story that tells itself. So if you just look at those, what aspects of your life are never true but always will be? Well, it's never true that God will burn you in hell, but it always will be as long as you believe it. You know, think deeply on what it means. What would it take for a story to tell itself? And when we realize we're talking about the story of life, you have to say, well, who is the storyteller then? So no matter how you come up with the answer to that, it doesn't matter if you go through a quantum physics path, a mathematical logical path. In fact, if you take the mathematical logical path, you'll end up with the answer being zero. Because, here's a little segue on this. You look at Big Bang Theory, and they can account for everything that happened right down to the first, 300 milliseconds from the Big Bang, but there's no indication whatsoever of where the energy or the matter came from to create a Big Bang
in the first place. Yep.
So what we have is a fundamental problem, because in math, 0 equals nothing. But if 0 is really nothing, then how do you possibly get to 1?
1 from
2,
nothing.
3, 4, 5, 6 from nothing, right? So you see, if the Big Bang is the beginning of a story and 0 is nothing, then it's impossible for the story to tell itself. And here we all are in the story of life. Therefore,
Oh,
zero doesn't equal nothing, it equals no thing. And
thing.
spirit itself is not a thing. Spirit is the flow of energy and information. And so, what is love? Love is the flow of energy and information through empathic and compassionate connection to self or other. So, it turns out that love, unconditional love, is zero, but it's full of potential. And the potential dreams itself into existence. And then we have the story that is perpetually telling itself because no thing has only something to relate to, which is the dream itself. So the point I'm driving at is one of the key first things you do in Spirit Gym is I take you step by step, which you've been through yourself, into the creation of your own myth. And then you illustrate it, and then you share it with someone that's 12 years old or a child, knowing that if a child can't understand it, then it's probably not going to be a good teaching story. And then what I do is ask you to analyze that myth. And with the question, is this who I choose to be? Is this taking me to a place of greater love, life, and freedom? Or is this story binding me? And is it binding others? Is it turning other people into objects? Is it paradoxically true while being untrue, meaning it's a story, but every story is telling us something that's true. And that's part of the challenge that we face. Because if you look, for example, at how people interpret scripture, Joseph Campbell makes it very clear, as does Houston Smith, that the lowest level of interpretation is literal. So if you read any myth, if I ask any one of my patients to write down their life story and I interpret it literally, there will be many things that don't make sense. Like, why would you leave your wife and have an affair when you're married to her, committed to her, have 3 kids, and made promises to each other? Well, you see, there's something. If you read, I am married to so and so and we have 3 kids, you are looking at a literal translation. But a myth is something that's never true but always will be, and what always will be true is that love has no rules. And so you see that people basically are always dancing between some ideology of what rules and what God wants and the reality of the power of love and the power of dreaming. And so there's always a mystery. But the key point I'm driving at is that one of the most important things in Spirit Gym that we do is we look at our myth, we look at which is our story, and we ask ourselves, is it really true? And is it working for me? Is it creating more freedom in my life? Is it creating more love? Or is it just something I've been programmed to believe and it's not serving me? And what's the effects of billions of people not taking responsibility for their co-creative ability to create and recreate their own story in more life affirmative, dream affirmative ways? And so I think if we don't look honestly at our own story, then we're forever unconscious. And that is what leads to the world that we're in right now, being unconscious. So Spirit Gym doesn't say your story's right or wrong. It just gives you tools for analysis. And, this began with your questioning about teaching people how to think. So I have an entire section in the lessons on holistic thinking, two lessons.
Yeah.
One is about what thought is and the nature of thought and where it comes from and how that relates to the soul and the spirit. But then I have holistic thinking as a skill set, and I teach that there's at very minimum, to be an effective thinker, you always have to approach every situation with the interest of knowing who, what, why, where, when, and how. So, for example, in my lesson, I say, okay, let's use a real common issue that has caused lots of trouble for people in the world. Let's just look at vaccination as a general theme and ask, who is it for? How does it work? What does it do? When does it work? So who, what, why,
Why?
why do you use it, when do you use it, and how do you use it? And when you actually look into that with an open mind, then you actually have the tools for healthy discernment. Like, does everyone need to take X vaccination, or is it only for people at certain age groups with certain preconditions or certain exposures, such as, not everybody needs to get a tetanus shot. Not if you step on a rusty nail or something and you believe in a tetanus shot, then great. But if we just start blanket blasting people, we have to look at what are the ramifications of that. And so if you, as a simple statement of holistic thinking, if you're going to buy a car, you should ask who, what, why, when, where, and how. If you're going to get married, if you're going to make a financial investment, who, what, why, where, when, and how. Because if you don't answer those questions, you're leaving gaping holes that can come, be a doorway to something that can bite you.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's, as we get towards the end here, this is just so fascinating. I want to touch on the Master Key, which is just your brilliant compilation of the 10 key principles. Now, Spirit Gym, correct me if I'm wrong, but 15 volumes. It has the whole online membership community.
There's the Master Key for
There,
anyone
isn't that
watching.
gorgeous? Look at that. I haven't seen that. Okay, everybody, it's Awakening Aphrodite on YouTube. Check it out. Oh my God. And I love how you get the black and the white wing for the yin and the yang,
Yeah.
Shakti and Shiva.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then the center is empty for the one, the all, the
For the
zero.
no thing that
Yeah.
gives birth to everything. And
And
then
then
you
the
have
10, the
Om.
10 principles. Om.
Om
Okay.
is the sound of God singing itself into
So
existence,
beautiful.
dreaming itself. And then myth, which is the story that tells itself. So then the principles 1 through 10.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about the mystery of God. Om is, it's the sound of God singing itself, but in Hinduism, it has a key meaning. Ah, I awaken, which is springtime or birth. Ooh, I'm dreaming, which is summertime. And so ah, I awaken is the air element, the beginning of mind. Ooh is the fire element, warmth, summer, and it's the developmental phase of a life. It's the process and the challenges that go with making something. And then is fall. That's the earth element. That's the harvest. That's the synthesis. That's where we get the fruits of our work and our growth process. And it's the fall period where fruiting is natural in nature. And then ah, I awaken. I'm dreaming. I'm falling asleep. Fall of our life cycle is when we become an elderly person and we're moving toward the end of our life. And then underscore means end of cycle, which would be the end of our physical lifetime, but it's also the end of any process. So the end of the manufacturing of something, the end of a marriage, the end of you're graduating from college. It's a transition point. So something new is going to emerge out of this emptiness, which is silence, which is really just the end of a cycle. So, like on a clock, it would be one full revolution around the clock. 12 numerologically symbolizes completion, and so does 4. So, Om is the cycle of 4, which is really describing everything from the birth of a subatomic particle to the birth of a star to the life of a galaxy to that of a human being. And because in metaphysics, sound means all frequency, it doesn't just mean audible sound. So Om is often misunderstood to only mean that which you hear when you chant Om. But in metaphysics, Om means all frequency, because all creation is made of only 3 things: energy, information, and frequency. So Om is telling the story of how energy manifests itself from pure potential to become something through the process of information, such as archetypes. And then the frequency is what makes the matrix of, you could call it the ether if you wanted to take a scientific approach, which would be like a stem cell in a human body that becomes everything. And so you're looking at how this whole process comes into manifestation, and frequency means, if you think of a rainbow, you got red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. But if you look at that from the low end, red would be the closest to matter, and the high end, violet, would be the closest to pure spirit. And we are, as a human being, a rainbow bridge between matter, such as teeth and bones, but spirit, such as mind and dreaming. And so you have these stages of development in there. And then the principle of the one is being itself. So being represents existence itself, which is spirit, Jim. But it also represents the non-dual nature of consciousness, because God is the eternal witness. God is the subject, or the I within us, that's having an experience. But that I cannot be excluded from everything else, because it's non-local and it's non-dual. So just like unconditional love is non-dual, there's no conditions there. It is ever-present witnessing or awareness. Two is the beginning of duality, which is the inherent nature of love and relationship and mind. Three is the capacity for dreaming and manifesting, which is the classic Holy Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or potential spirit matter. There's many, many trinities that I share in Spirit Gym, so people can see it from a philosophical, scientific, and religious perspective. Four is the principle of manifestation, four elements, the four cycles of Om, the four doctors we all need to understand: Dr. Happiness, Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Movement.
Or life process archetypes.
The four life process archetypes: child, warrior, king, queen, and wise man, wise woman. It's the four elements of alchemy: earth, water, fire, and air.
Four seasons.
Four seasons. So the four is really the number of completion, but four really symbolizes how does dreaming and thinking come into manifestation. And when we understand that, we can actually see how we're manifesting things all the time. And if we're not conscious, then we keep thinking somebody else did it to us. So it's easy to become a victim. Five is the number of basically process. So five in a process is that middle stage. If you look at Hegel's philosophy, Hegel says everything begins as a thesis, an idea, a goal, a dream, an objective. Then we go through the process of manifestation, but we always come into antithesis. Your widget turns out not to work quite as well, or the materials aren't strong enough, or there's always a process. You start a marathon, and by the time you get halfway, you're wondering, can I really make it to the end of this thing? So the antithesis is the challenge stage, and that's where you really do the work of growth in Spirit Gym. But five is also the Hierophant, which is the spiritually intact mentor guide that takes us through the challenge of the hero's journey. And
or
then
the heroine's journey.
Or the heroine's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's five program design factors we all have to be aware of, which I described, so that if we're developing a program for, healing addiction, or healing trauma, or getting fit in the gym, or changing our diet or our lifestyle, we understand these inherent five program design factors, because if you miss any one of them, the chances of success go down drastically. Six is the six foundation principles: nutrition, hydration, sleep, breathing, thinking, and movement, which are foundational to life, and mistakes there cost you. Seven is the seven chakras and the principles of the spirit and the soul, and how. So I share the anatomy and physiology of the spirit and the soul, so people really understand what they are saying when they use those words, and how to have a relationship with your own spirit and soul, so you have God within you, because God is the only potential source that can give a soul. All souls are God manifest. Eight is the principle of self-reflection. So we realize how important it is to take time to introspect and to review what we're creating. And that really goes back to one of the key principles of the three, which is the three qualities of the soul. The three qualities of the soul are abiding, which is the witnessing function of God; to reflect, which means the soul has memory, and we can look back on what we've created and ask ourselves, is that what we want to keep creating, or do we want to create something new or that's more supportive of what we need now? And the soul also represents. So the soul abides, reflects, and represents. So the principle of the eight is all about reflection. And so here you have practices like meditation, journaling, um, shadow work, looking at beliefs that may not be serving us anymore. So the eight is the process of inner work and bringing our consciousness inside and working with our inner systems, our inner beliefs, our emotions.
I love the eighth because it's the to me it's the moon.
It is the moon, yes,
Yeah.
and it's tarot 18
Yeah.
is it's very
The moon
tarot 18.
archetype. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, look, the function of reflection is the world is always changing. Buddha said the only law of the universe is impermanence, but the ego likes to create the illusion of permanence. So, for example, if you're married and you think you actually know who your spouse is, that's the day that the relationship starts to die, because
Yep.
you actually create a fixed idea in your mind. But it can take you an entire lifetime, and you still may not truly know the person inside that you're married to, and they may not know themselves yet. So the process of the eight is saying, what is reality? What is reality offering me? And I describe reality as what's happening right now. And reality is everything that you need to support your life, because without food, water, and air, for example, it doesn't matter what reality is, we won't be here. So when we're reflecting, we're always having to say, what is my dream? How am I doing at managing myself to be dream affirmative? And what are the demands of reality as the world is constantly changing? And that means we have to be careful about belief systems, because belief systems are inherently closed by nature. As I say, how much Buddhism could you put in the Bible before it wasn't Christianity anymore? Well, none. Not really, or you would have two religions in one book. So dogmas were always inherently systems of belief developed by the founders of religions to try to codify the key principles and practices that made the religion what it is. But Christianity is over 2,000 years old. So there you see an outdated myth. Nobody in the time of Jesus would have had a clue what a cell phone was, for example. In fact, they probably would have thought it was some kind of a miraculous trinket that fell out of a rock formation somewhere because it was shiny. But and they were riding around on horses and donkeys and vehicles with wooden wheels. But here we are still trying to run this old, outdated software in a time of radically different needs. And look at, as we've discussed, you and I, many times, just look at the differences between the relationship between men and women in the time of the Bible and men and women now. And if you're still running on that outdated reality, then you're probably not going to have a very healthy relationship with a woman at all. And so we have this capacity to reflect, to introspect, to dream, and to represent. That's an inherent quality of the soul. Who do I choose to be today? The Paul Chek that I was a year ago isn't the same Paul Chek I am now. And I wouldn't want to go back to that one, even though he was doing the best he could. Every day I can learn and grow and go deeper into my connection with my soul and my spirit and God within me, and become more conscious of the ways of living and relating than I was a year ago. And so it turns out that that's real, where most of the work of spiritual growth is saying, what could I do better to be more congruent with love? And how can I represent myself so I'm not only congruent with love, but I'm congruent with reality?
Mm-hmm.
The
And
principle of
myself.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And really, what is the self? It's everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
None of us can be here without the whole. The principle of the nine is a new level of awareness. So now that you've gone through these stages, you have your myth, you understand the importance of asking the question, is it true? You know how to think holistically. you know how to dream, you know the importance of dreaming and setting goals, you know how to take responsibility for yourself, you know how to create your own program for self development. Nine says, now that you've got all this, you're at a new state of awareness. What are the things you need to do to make sure you don't fall off the wagon and become the person that you've just outgrown, which is, because there's a real center of gravity to society, right? Misery loves company. And, if we don't have a big enough dream, then we don't have a sense of levity to pull us out of the inertia of program beliefs and behaviors.
And that lighthouse, that something that you're aiming towards, it gives you direction.
You need a North Star on your compass because, because if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there.
It's how you make your choices. It's like,
Yes.
okay, is this dream affirmative? I mean, that's a
Yes.
question we can ask ourselves 20 times a day. Every decision we have to make. Is this getting me closer to my dream or further from my dream?
Yes, and so part of having a dream is having values to support it. And I say all the time to my patients and clients and students, without values, you have no way to determine when to say no. And so your yes has no value until you learn to say no. If you have no discernment over the food you eat, you'll eat anything and you'll probably end up being like the average person, overweight, out of shape, unhealthy, sick, because you don't know when to say no.
And I'll add to that so many people in our culture today, as a side note, they do have values, or at least they think they do. But when it comes down to it, they're not living their values. So we do have values, but we have to be more cognizant of what they are and then put our money where our mouth is and live our values. That's a big part of my course too, and this is what I've learned from you, the importance of that stage of our life, the warrior stage, whether you're a man or a woman, is that's where you get clear on what your values are. And I love your definition of it that you taught me, that it's what you're willing to die for. It's where you're going to put your line in the sand. Like
Yep.
this gives meaning and importance to my life. And I'm drawing that line in the sand, and I'll die on this hill because this is a value for me. And for me to live in integrity with myself, which is going to prevent energy leaks and my loss of power and all these things that we all experience, and feeling like a victim and like a leaf in the wind and all that stuff. I need to live by those values. And that warrior stage is something that I think we're lacking in culture today, both for men and women. So I know Spirit Gym helps us.
Yeah, it's a very serious issue today. And,
Yeah.
the thing is you have to ask yourself the question, if I'm not living my values, am I really living?
Yeah.
And whose values am I
whose
living?
Whose life am I living?
Yeah, whose life am I living?
Uh-huh.
And the problem is, people have values, but most of them are unconscious.
Yeah.
And if they're unconscious, it means there's somebody else's values that were programmed into you. Because when you program your own values, then you're, by definition, you're doing it. So you're saying, this is me, right?
And you're wondering why you're sick, tired, unhappy, unfulfilled.
Yes.
Yeah, because you're not tapped into your authentic self. Yeah.
Yes, and you know very well. I created a concept called the pain teacher, and many people say, well, how do I talk to my soul? And I'm having a hard time connecting with my soul. I say, look, whenever you're having a hard time paying attention to your soul or listening to your soul, just look at where the pain teacher's showing up in your life, because the pain teacher's showing you right where you need to direct your attention and do some healing work to create the inner harmony so you can hear the still small voice of the soul. And so what I'm saying is, people have values, but most of them are unconscious. And if they're unconscious, it means there's somebody else's values until you make them conscious. And if you're not sure where your values are not life affirmative or dream affirmative, then just look at where the pain teacher's coming to visit you. Are you having chronic problems in relationships with people you love? Are you having chronic health problems? Are you having chronic money problems? Are you addicted? That's where the pain teacher's showing up. So that's your soul saying, hey, pay attention, because you came here to create something more beautiful than this. The average person's doing this. This is putting God to sleep. This is boring. You're here to truly live. So you need to wake up to who and what it is in your heart that you came here to express. because every one of us is absolutely and utterly unique. There will never be another Amy Fournier. There will never be another Paul Chek. There will never be. God is 100% novelty generator, which means every one of us carries the seed of genius that is necessary to the whole. And if we spend our life living someone else's values and someone else's dictates and someone else's dream, then we never release our own genius. So it's kind of like carrying the seed of the fruit of life and the fruit of love, but we never plant it until we decide what our myth is and who we are and what our values are. And that turns out to be the soil and the water and the light that makes the genius within each of us grow. And we know when we're there because we have a sense of fulfillment. We have a sense of awe. We have a sense of inherent, we have an inner compass that says, no, I don't want to eat that way because if I do, I won't have the energy to build my new house. And that's my dream. Or I don't want to eat in ways that disable my ability to be a responsible parent, or drink or drug in ways that do that. So we really have to do the process of inner exploration and excavating everything else out that's been programmed into us, sifting through it and say, you know, mom and dad's ideas about money were pretty good. They did good there, but they didn't get along very well. And you know, dad was very patriarchal. And that, if I repeat that, that's not going to serve me well. I don't want to be married to a woman that will put up with that because she won't be my equal. So you see, these are just simple examples of how Spirit Gym takes you on a guided tour of what you've got to look into to create real freedom. Because as long as you're unconscious, you're never free. You're always somebody else's robot, play toy. You're acting out. You're not creating. You're simply acting out like a machine that just prints and prints and prints. So the principle of the 10 is really, now that I've made it through a cycle of the hero's journey, I'm at the rest cycle of Om. So I've gone through the awakening, the dreaming, the working through the challenge. I've gathered the fruit. I've healed the addiction. I've overcome my false beliefs or my program beliefs. I've found a new God that is fulfilling to me, that I can feel love for and safe with. And the 10 is, okay, now that you've completed a cycle of growth, it's time to go into a winter phase rest and redream. Say, who do I want to create next? Or how do I take myself to the next level of fulfillment, or to the next level of healing, or the next level of self-realization? And how can I do that as a gift, not only to myself, but for everybody around, as an inspiration to others, to know that we, all the way till we're, you know, the day we die as an old person, we can still be recreating ourselves. We can, you know, and you and I have studied many older people that are 70s, 80s, 90s. I remember James Carse was 87 when I interviewed him, and his mind was incredibly sharp. And he wrote amazing books, and he still was dropping inspirational bombs left, right, and center. Houston Smith died at 102, I believe, and he was considered the world's greatest expert in world religion. And he was a mind-blowingly deep, incredibly loving, wise human being that was a great inspiration for all of us. So you see, when you're in Spirit Gym, if you practice these things, your body may get old, but your spirit never does. In fact, your spirit gets stronger and stronger, and you get more and more connected. And really, spirituality, by definition, is the process of connecting to a progressively greater whole. So through spirituality, you overcome the idea of my people, my religion, my group, and you become part of a bigger group. You go from my religion to world religion. You go from myself to my group to world consciousness to cosmo consciousness to full understanding and illumination of, you know, that which is beyond idea or concept itself. And that's really real freedom. And that's really where the soul came from, is total freedom. And so but this time you come back as a conscious being in a much higher degree of co-contribution. And so that's really Spirit Gym is just this, it's just a willingness to step forward and say, okay, I must take responsibility for the gifts that the mystery gave me, in me, and as me, and celebrate that even the challenges are opportunities in Spirit Gym, and there is nowhere but Spirit Gym. Spirit Gym is everywhere. If you can
You,
say
you're in.
I,
You're
you're
in it.
there.
You're in it if you like it or not.
There's nothing outside of
Yeah,
it really.
you're in it.
Spirit Gym means
Yeah,
anywhere that consciousness exists.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, to me, it's really kind of a rule book as to how to navigate in these really monumental times. And it's just, I know it took you 4 years to put together, but it's right on time, and the timing is perfect.
Yeah, well, it's really, and I've had many experiences in meditation and talking to my own soul, and it's really, in essence, it's what I lived to do.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
yes, I've created the Chek Institute and I've invented lots of things, but all of those were really like building blocks to build the sort of castle of awareness, if you will, of what it is that God's up to. Because
yeah,
when you realize what God's up to, then everything else falls right in place. And you can see that it is all a dream and it is all a magical, mystical, I mean, people think Harry Potter's amazing, but guess what? You're far beyond that. I mean, look at the miracle of your own body every day. How do you get 100 trillion cells, each made out of 100 trillion atoms, to dance in tune and wake up? How do you keep eating food and drinking water and breathing air from outside of yourself, turning over every single cell in the human body on an annual basis, yet somehow I can still recognize Amy, even though not a single cell in her body right now is the one that I was looking at when she was standing in my office last time. And so
yeah.
there you see the principle of the entelechy, the guiding intelligence of the soul, and you see that the universe is God's body, and so it's the same process. So when you realize that we're in this incredibly magical, mysterious, awesome, wild experience that's really like a perpetual shamanic journey, just like any shamanic journey, there's certain principles and practices that you engage to prepare yourself for it. So you stay conscious and you convert challenges into opportunities and you come out wiser and more awake and more whole and a better guide to others. And I can't think of a better way to manage the issues of the world and get a collective of people together that really want to worship, honor, love, and respect each other and inspire each other to go out into the world and give room for people to be who they want to be, but help them be more conscious of the fact that they can be somebody that is more aligned with freedom and more aligned with health and more aligned with love, and not have to be polarized against other people of different colors,
Mm,
different sexes, different
hmm.
belief systems, because that's all, those are all indications that people are still asleep.
Yeah, yeah.
They're generating unnecessary resistance. And it's far better to wake up on your own than it is to have the pain teacher come smack you
Hmm.
upside the head and say, hey, guess what? You're not loving very much. And this is what happens when
Mm,
you live that way, or you're not loving your body. So, yes, you created cancer so you can learn how to take care of yourself, or go back to zero and start again.
mm. Well, I will add before you share with us how we can find out more about Spirit Gym, just the wonderful community. You've alluded to it many times that, that's been a beautiful evolution of this whole thing now that Spirit Gym is out in the world, that, you've got hundreds of people that have already jumped on board. They're involved. You've got weekly live coaching calls with you, a very active community of, as you mentioned, beautiful, open-minded, loving, inspired people of all different walks of life, all different stages of development, some at their just beginning their spiritual journey, some that have been walking the path a long time, but everybody in a very supportive, positive, can-do attitude. And it's, you've created a movement, and the community is one of the most powerful parts of this whole thing. And that says a lot, because your 15 volumes and all these lessons and everything you've created is so significant, but the community is truly the icing on the cake. So, do you want to share with us in closing, Paul, any final thoughts? And then, of course, where you and everybody, this will be in the show notes if you're driving or busy, but where you can direct people to find out more about learning about Spirit Gym and how they can join.
Yeah, I'll just say also that when you join Spirit Gym, the master key lessons are very complete. So they're complete with exercises to embody practices, various types of meditation, various types of journaling practices, suggestions for how to adjust your diet, how to breathe properly, the principles of movement. So it's not just a community, and it's not just me giving a lecture or a lesson each week. You actually can go through these lessons, and it's if you're committing yourself to it, it will take most people over a year to get through the lessons.
Yeah.
Right now, there's over 60 lessons. By the time I'm finished the last series of lessons I'm working on now, there'll probably be about 65 to 80 hours of online training that you work through at your own pace. And it's real practices. It's not
Oh
just a
yeah.
bunch of lectures. It's like,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
now that you understand this, go apply this in your life. And here's what you're looking
Yeah.
for. Here's how you do it. Um, there's different levels of membership. The lowest level is the podcast membership, which is the extended play on the Spirit Gym podcast. And so you can look at the podcast at paulchek.com, and you'll see the Spirit Gym podcast and that membership. And that gives people exposure to the concepts of Spirit Gym for a very low monthly fee of only $7.99, which is really a minimal investment. Then you can join Spirit Gym by the month, and then you have access to the lessons that are fed to you on a suggested pace for learning. If you become a founders member, you pay for the whole year up front. Then you have full access to the entire menu of lessons, so you can shop around. There's a large community. There's mentors. I'll be bringing guest mentors in, people like yourself. There's mentors that come in to help me run the lessons. There's an option to join a small mastery group where you get a lot more specific attention from me, which is a much more expensive investment, but it's what you're paying for, my time and personal guidance. And all of that's available at myspiritgym.com. Myspiritgym.com. Name that specifically because it is your spirit gym. And I will also just close by saying, this is not me telling you what to do. This is not me telling you how to practice, or selling you on a religion. You can be an atheist, you can be a Christian, you can be a Muslim, you can be a Buddhist, you can be an agnostic. I really created a meta myth structure so you can have a system for looking at yourself and saying, is this who I really want to be?
Yeah.
And being with a bunch of people that are open-minded and sharing their own process and supporting you and yours. So it's really principles. I looked carefully for my whole life for the principles that really are inherent to what Spirit Gym is, which is life itself, which is consciousness itself, and mind, and how we use these principles to create. So it's not by any means a system of dictation or a
No.
cult. It's really a system of how do you create real freedom for yourself and learn how to love yourself and love others in ways that are nourishing to you and more fulfilling to you. And when we learn to do that, we always create more wholeness in ourselves, because love inherently wants to become what it really is. And ultimately, the highest form of love is unconditional. And so, as a kind of a closing statement, I teach my students, I ask them, do you know what the word evolution really means? Well, most of them give me a Darwinian explanation. So then I have them write it down on a piece of paper, and I say, now read it backwards. You'll see the words NO, put a dash there. Then you'll see the words IT, put a dash between no and it. Then put a dash between it and you, and between you and love. And you'll see it says, no it you love. So evolution spiritually is coming to the point where there is no it you love, no
Hmm.
thing you love, because you love it all. And that's really what enlightenment is to realize it's all God and it's all you. And it's the most beautiful, real illusion there ever will be. And ultimately, if God is unconditional love, that's the highest truth. And so when you reach know it you love, you have found home. You are
And
home.
freedom. And
And
freedom.
freedom,
True
ultimate freedom.
freedom.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
I love it. Paul Chek, myspiritgym.com. Again, everybody, that'll be in the show notes. And of course, Paul's amazing podcast that's now called Spirit Gym
with Paul Chek. Yeah.
With Paul Chek. And super excited and grateful to be part of this beautiful offering. Everyone, I really hope you check it out. And Paul, thanks again. Third time's a charm.
Well, I know you never told anybody, but Spirit Gym wouldn't be in existence if it wasn't for you. You're the one that really lit the fire under my ass and said, Paul, you got to get this out there, and became my partner in Spirit Gym. So for all of you listening, she's being humble, but I want everybody to know Spirit Gym is very, very much an expression of Amy's love too. So we are partners in Spirit Gym because we
Paul.
all want all of you to have the freedom that we enjoy each day.
And I'm living proof of it working, because
yes, you are.
All the principles in it are what you and I worked through in the last many years working together privately. So I'm living proof of the Spirit Gym lifestyle and principles. So super grateful and just so excited that after all this work and time, it's out there, it's alive, it's kicking, it's breathing. And here we go, everybody, creating the new world together. myspiritgym.com. Paul Chek, thanks again for being on Awakening Aphrodite.
Well, thank you.
Everybody, thanks so much for hanging in with us this whole time. And we'll see you on Fit Amy TV on Instagram and Awakening Aphrodite podcast, of course. Okay, everybody. See you in Spirit Gym.
Bye-bye.
Would you like to support my mission to help empower people all over the world to be all of who they truly are? If so, please subscribe to the show, leave a review on iTunes, and share it with a friend. And if you're looking to take immediate action to align your energy and optimize your health, visit amyfournier.com. Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite. Let's awaken her together in you. I'm your hostess, Amy Fournier, and I already can't wait to be with you again and for you to hear what I have planned for the next show.
Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. To learn more about Amy, check out her website, amyfournier.com. That's AMYFOURNIER.com. You can also check out Amy's live and on-demand virtual fitness and yoga classes, and sign up for her newsletter to receive a free mini ebook of 3 of her top tips for making holistic health a lifestyle. Again, that's amyfournier.com, and get your ebook sent to your email immediately. Connect with Amy on the daily on Instagram at FitAmyTV, FITAMYTV, and watch many of the podcast episodes and subtopic clips on her YouTube channel, which is also Fit Amy TV. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time on Awakening Aphrodite.